Well, Francesco Aquilini is in studio this morning, tired but pumped. Good morning.
Good morning, Bill.
What time did you get to bed last night?
Well, we got in about 3:30, and by the time, you get into bed and fall asleep was like 5.
Well, I'm especially appreciative then of the fact that you managed to get in here this morning, because I talked to you yesterday afternoon briefly when you were in L.A., and I got the sense that I was talking to a very nervous man.
Yeah, yesterday was, was a pretty important day for us, being down 3-0 and, and wanting to win Game 4, and you just don't know how it's going to turn out, and you just have to be ready for whatever is going to happen.
How hard have the past few days been for you watching your team go down 3-0?
Yeah, that was tough, but I'll tell you something, Bill. This is a good team. This is a very good team. They have lots of confidence. They have lots of experience, and they just know what to do. I mean, they're a great group of guys, and I'm really proud of them.
Most fans, I think, and I suspect you are a fan too, looked at last year and thought, okay, it's tough, but this time we're prepared for what's ahead. A grind. It takes 4 series and 16 wins. Then to lose 3 straight. Whoa. I mean, do you become as emotionally involved as most other fans?
Oh, absolutely. I get involved, and, being a little closer to the most people, I can see what the guys go through and how they prepare. And, these are top-level professional athletes. And, they compete every night, and, you can't control the results. I mean, at the end of the day, all you can expect is a great effort. And, the last 2-3 games has been amazing.
It's not all about the money, but it's a lot about money. You have a huge investment in this team. The thought of just 2 playoff games must have been daunting.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's always, it's about winning. And, when you win, good things happen. And, we have more playoff games, and we have more revenues, and the sponsors get excited, and the fans get excited. It's not just about the money. The money is secondary. It's really about winning first.
How involved does an owner get? Were you consulted in the decision to start Corey Snyder last night?
Well, that decision is made by a group of people. I mean, that is not a one-person decision. And, Mike ultimately and the coach decide. And, they're closer to it than anybody else. They see, they talk to the players on a daily basis. They get a feel for the dressing room. And ultimately it's their decision. I might, chat with them about it, give them my opinion. But ultimately, that's the coach's decision.
You don't tell them what to do?
No. Even if I did, I don't think they would listen.
Really? You'd be okay with that?
Well, I think they're doing such a good job that my input is only secondary. I mean, they're close to it. I mean, they see it every day. They live it. They breathe it. And for me, my job is really to support them.
And you have great faith, I know, in Mike Gillis.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. He's done a tremendous job. Bringing some great players here. Filling a lot of holes that we had, and working with the team. I mean, he's done a tremendous job. I mean, the results speak for themselves. But
did you have any idea what you were getting into back in was it 2004 when your family bought this hockey club? Did you know that you were going to be doing things like this today, and that I suspect everywhere you go, people have an opinion that they want to express to you?
I kind of had an idea, but I really didn't understand it. I really didn't quite get what was coming ahead and what the expectations were, and the marketplace here, and how people are so hockey crazy. I've always was a fan of the Canucks since I was a little kid, and I always wanted to be part of the team just like every other little kid does. But I didn't really understand the demands and the pressure. I really didn't understand. And as time went on, I started to have to adapt. In the public profile, and it's so important to a lot of people here, and it matters, and it's kind of like the glue of our community.
Well, the last owner, John McCaw, was from Seattle. He was a very private, very shy individual. Stayed totally out of the public spotlight. You've had to adapt and been willing to adapt, and ready to assume the responsibility of being the face of the hockey club, in a sense.
Yes, absolutely, and John, I mean, he did a tremendous job keeping the team here. There was years where there was huge losses, and he was, writing the checks. He stepped up and he did his part. And, he lived in Seattle, and, he didn't live here. And so he couldn't be in the community. And so, when he sold the team, he wanted it to be someone who lived here and who was passionate about hockey, because he knew that's what was needed. And fortunately, we were able to make a deal, and my brothers and I owned the team.
You said you were a big fan when you were a kid.
Yeah.
Could you go to games?
I grew up a block away from the Coliseum, and so as a little kid, like 10, 12 years, in the 70s, when I was a little kid, I would go to the games and I would ask just people walking to the building if they had an extra ticket. And every once in a while, people would hand me a ticket. And it's just quite amazing. I look back and, because, sometimes people have an extra ticket or they have a single and they don't want to sell it. And they see little kids running around and they just give it to them. So I kind of do that once in a while too, because it kind of brings me back.
But the point I was getting to is you grew up at a point where you really couldn't afford to go to hockey games.
No, I couldn't afford it. No, absolutely not. Like my parents, have done very well, and we're in the construction business, but my mom and dad weren't really hockey fans, and they couldn't understand, like, why are you going to games? Why, and so for them it was like, yeah, just get out of the house and go do your thing and play.
Much more. We'll get a little bit more personal. I want to find out, your first job, things like that, attributes of a great leader of an organization, whether or not you had a mentor. Francesco Aquilini is my guest, and we'll continue after this. Talking with Francesco Aquilini, Managing Director of the Aquilini Investment Group. You can talk all you want about construction, all you want to talk about blueberries. All anybody really cares about, it seems, is the Vancouver Canucks. But I want to find out more about you. What was your first job?
My first job was working in a construction site as a sweeper.
Family business?
Family business, yeah. My dad was building a building on Great Northern Way. I was like 12 years old, and remember he says, you should get a job, and I said okay, and I wanted to earn some money, and he put me with one of his foremans, and they put a broom in my hand, and they said, sweep all these apartments in the
So he started you at the top.
Yeah.
You remember what they paid you?
It was like 25 cents an hour.
Really?
Yeah. 25 cents an hour. And I remember collecting my first check too. It was quite interesting.
How much?
It was like $28 or something like that.
Okay. But from then, you went to Simon Fraser University.
Correct.
Business school.
Yeah.
Then got your master's in business in California.
Correct.
So so by then you pretty much knew what you wanted to do.
That's right. I always knew I wanted to be in business. Business was always something that intrigued me. When I was in East Van, when I lived there, I started parking cars in my parents' backyard, and I would charge them $10 because we were so close to the P&E during
my
the fair.
first job was parking cars at the P&E.
Yeah, and so what happened was, I park. You could park, I think 5 or 6 cars. Like you could pack them in there, and then a bylaw came. You could only park 4 cars. Because I started packing all these cars. So then I went to all the neighbors and made deals with them and said if I could park cars in their backyard, I'd give them 50% of the revenue. So I had like 50 cars I was parking on a daily basis for that 2 weeks fair during the P&E.
And how old were you then?
I was like 12.
Still, eh?
Yeah. So I was actually the first one that started that. And then now, if you go by the P&E, you see all these people standing in the street corners with signs saying they want parking. And so I was actually one of the first ones that actually started that. And
born entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I started working for my dad in the construction sites and, working for his carpenters and plumbers, electricians, and, worked in construction, on the weekends and sometimes even after school. And then when I graduated from high school, I went to work for my dad in the office. And for about a year, doing property management, collecting rents and that sort of stuff, and more administrative tasks. And I kind of liked it, but it was an experience, and I liked it. And then I went to then I started university, and I went to Simon Fraser, and this was in the early 80s, and my dad had a huge portfolio of apartment buildings in Toronto and Montreal, about 50 buildings.
And those were tough times.
This was in the early 80s. Interest rates was 21%. There was about 10,000 units. There was like a 25-30% vacancy rate. And so at that time, my dad needed me. He needed me to help him. And so that's kind of when I really went into the business. And I went to school part-time. So I would go to school in the evenings. I would, do condensed programs, and I would work on these projects back east to fill up the buildings because we needed to lease them out to make the mortgage payments. And it was a really tough time because, we could, barely scrape by and pay our bills. And so it was really dependent on me to make sure that these units were rented and we were collecting rents. And that's kind of the time when I really, built some character. That's when I really, turned the corner and started really understanding about business and what it takes and commitment.
It's tough, isn't it?
It's very hard. Yeah.
I mean, people think that development is a cash cow and that construction is just a license to print money. It couldn't be further from the truth.
Absolutely. I mean, it just, it takes a long time to get there, to learn the skills and have the experience and know the right people and the risk. I mean, the risk is enormous. And so it's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it.
Was there a time when you could pinpoint now the real turning point in your family business, in the company, where you knew you had made it?
I think is when we had the portfolio of apartment buildings back east in the early 80s, and then what happened was my dad sold them all in the late 80s, and that's kind of when I knew that things had turned around. It's a lot of lean years, very tough, and a lot of companies in Vancouver went bankrupt, and my dad managed to survive and pay all his bills, and he all our competitors and business associates, were losing buildings to foreclosures. And, so my dad always, paid all his bills. And so after that, it was kind of like when we sold everything, then he started going into agriculture and started diversifying and started going into hotels, and the business kind of grew from there.
Was that the beginning, really, of the Aquilini Investment Group? Yeah,
but before that, my dad started the business in the 60s. And he started brick by brick. I mean, he built the business. He built one house and then sold it, and then built two houses and then sold it, and then built three houses and then built an apartment building. And he was the typical Canadian dream. Immigrant wants to come to Canada, build a future for himself, for his family. It'd be kind of like somebody coming to the bottom of Mount Everest and saying, "I want to climb that mountain." My dad's one of those guys who's done that.
Was he your mentor?
Yeah. My mother and my father are my mentors, both of them.
Talk a little bit about your mom.
Yeah, she's she's a stay-at-home mom, and she's kind of the backbone of the family. She keeps everything together, and she's the one that kind of guides us and is always there and is like the rock. She's kind of like the rock, and
she still tell you what to do sometimes?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. She's great. And, I see her all the time, at least a couple of times a week. I go for dinner and for lunch and see her. We talk on